Spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David E.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Longstrugs.
Well, aloha on this beautiful Monday morning. I'm Yanji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei Suji. This is Spotlight Hawaii on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. Thanks so much to those of you who are logging in and being with us on this morning. And Ryan, today we are heading over to Honolulu Hale.
That's right. We're catching up with Mayor Rick Blangiardi, who joins us now this morning live. Good morning, Mayor. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a few months, but great to see you again. I believe you are muted, Mayor. If you can unmute your mic. Can you unmute?
I thought I would do this whole interview muted. I thought, just spice it up for you a little bit. Anyway, I acknowledge. I said thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Yanji. I appreciate being on with you. Has it been a couple of months? Wow.
It has, yeah. Well, great to hear from you. And we have a lot to discuss. We want to first start off with your state of the city that you delivered last week, some of the highlights, and one headline that in particular that came out of that address was your proposal to end the rail project at South Street instead of Ala Moana. Wanted to get your thoughts on what you're hearing from the HART board, from the FTA about this proposal and this plan, and if you can explain a little bit more about your thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, the HART board has been very involved. Well, I shouldn't say the HART board. I've not heard from them necessarily, but as I mentioned in my discussion last week, or my address, that, Colleen Hanabusa has been part of our team that we meet each week with, Tommy Waters, chair of the city council, Lori Kayakina, Rick Keene from HART, two top executives, and then John, Roger Morton and John Nouchi, along with Mike Formby and myself, Mike being the managing director. So we've had a collaboration, if you will, at the table. I've not heard back from anybody or the HART board itself. This is on a proposal. This is what's going to go before the FTA as a recovery plan, which we're going to submit on or before June 30th. I would mention last week I'd been in Washington the week prior. I met personally with the FTA and Noria Fernandez, the administrator, and her team. And then later in the day, Roger and I with Lori, we talked about our plan, if you will. And then later that night, actually met with Ray Tellis, who's an administrator as well with the FTA. So this is all subject to approval. But at the end of the day, I think I spelled it out pretty simply. We looked at the amount of money we would have available to us, what that meant in the aggregate, from the standpoint of the GET, state TAT, the city's new TAT, the $214 million the city had put into it at the onset, and then add to that the FTA's money of $1.55 billion. And so when you put that together, it adds up to about $9.8 billion. And we looked at that and we said, what can we build for that? And so it's through a process of value engineering and deferring, as we said, the Pearl Highlands Garage and some other adjustments that we made. We think we can take it to Civic Center. We've had all of those numbers looked at by a third-party source, a company called Tri-Unity, in conjunction with the FTA and the PMOC. So there are no surprises here. And I was really back in Washington just to make sure that our plans and getting ready to cross the T's and dot the I's on our recovery plan was on track with their expectations. So it's not an insignificant thing to change the terminus because you had a full funding grant agreement tied to the release of those funds that had Ala Moana designated as what they call an MOS, a minimal operating segment. But I think that they understand now, under the circumstances, all that many years, and based on our resources and everything else, that if we can get it to Halikuila and South Street in that area, and first of all, one of the things I did not say in the state of the city is that's an ideal location for us from the standpoint of what we will create for a bus transit center down there, so that we can have it's always been a multimodal system, right? We're going to get off at Ala Moana and get on buses. Well, we have really ample room down there to create something really good for express buses to all the various locations on the east side. And then, of course, we plan to do the same thing on the west side out in Kapolei. as part of the service of this. So, we're excited about this proposal because we believe strongly we can deliver on it. And we're out from under the, billions of dollars over budget, attitude and undefined timetables. We feel pretty clearly about what we can do, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that. And so that's where we're at. And this has come about as a result of weekly meetings. We've put a lot of time and a lot of collaboration, a lot of verification going into the best of our thinking. And I think from a strategy standpoint, it's what makes sense. We're not giving up on Ala Moana. In fact, our drawings are already complete to Ala Moana, but that's going to be a different phase. I realize I'm talking the whole time now. You haven't asked me any questions, but you look at these mega projects in all cities, and they're done in phases. And so this first phase, is what it is. And we need to put a ribbon on that. And I'll tell you very candidly, and I didn't say this again last week, but our ability to get the FTA to start giving us money, which they've not given us since 2017, which I mentioned, is a big deal. That's $744 million they're holding. If, in fact, in my request to them, provided our recovery plan is accepted, and that is all, that is a real conditional thing. But assuming that it is, we've asked for $250 million a year over the next 3 years, 250, and then the balance. If we are afforded that, if this plan is accepted and triggers that, that'll save us over $100 million in financing costs. Right? And right now, the plan is, as I mentioned, to City Street, out of the 9.8, it's about 9.1 billion in construction and 650 million in financing. And so if we can drive down our financing costs along the way, continue to also drive down our costs, who knows? We may go further, but I don't think so. I think that phase, 18.75 miles, 19 stops through all three major employment centers, is a fully functional rail system. And then whatever the plan would be for the next phase, be it to Ala Moana or beyond, or even possibly on the backside, going into Kamakana Ali'i Shopping Center and have this thing, originate in a place that looks very different than where it originates right now. If you've been out there to Kapolei to see the first stop, it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. That makes some sense. And this is a transformative project. It was always built to be a 100-year project for this island. And I think this is just a matter of us getting to a place of clarity on and coming up with deliverables that we can actually deliver on.
You did mention that you met with the FTA both now and in your State of the City. What were those meetings like? I'm imagining that there is trust lost on both sides. How are you working to repair that relationship? And just at first blush, what was their reaction to what you are proposing?
Well, it really wasn't at first blush, Yanji, not to correct you per se, but we've had ongoing conversations, and Lori Kayakina has done a really good job of working with the FTA on a regular basis. We've had our quarterly calls, and I've actually done a few Zoom calls as well. So I think, candidly, they really have appreciated the fact, as I said earlier, that we've been meeting it weekly. I've not abdicated on this as a mayor. I've been very involved in it. It's a team we've brought to the table. The fact that we don't have the open acrimony and dysfunction that prior was going on, whether it was between council, the Hart board, that we brought the leadership together to try to get everybody on the same page. I think that they really appreciated that. I think they've appreciated the clarity in our thinking, in our articulation of why we're doing what we're doing. I think they've gained confidence from, as I said, the third-party review. They review they review everything that's been submitted, so they know that what we're saying is good, and we've gone through what's in there for contingency and what's not. I think that I wanted to go face to face with them because, in all honesty, it's just I wish we were meeting face to face. Even though I understand we're in a new era now with Zoom calls and whatever, but there are certain meetings in a moment in time when you want to be together. And I think that I felt very well received by Nuria Fernandez, the administrator, and her team. The questions were good. They were not hostile. They were constructive. The dialogue was good. I walked away from Washington last weekend feeling very good about the trip.
Well, we know that this will take some time to make the decision, and ultimately, if it does get approved or not, just to build that section, will take some time. In the meantime, there is a large segment of the rail that is completed. Would you support the rail operating to a certain point, a certain location in the intermediacy while the the town center and the town side of things continues to construct?
Okay, well, let me lay it out for you, Ryan. That's a good question. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because, well, as we said, we hope to start or establish interim operations to Aloha Stadium. Our target date is August of 22. That's in a few months. It may be a little bit later, could go as far as into 23 because, of what we've had to deal with in the way of stuff that happened long before we got in there, which we're working through. But be that as it may, we expect to be at Middle Street by February of 24. As I mentioned the other day, the guideway is already built to Middle Street. We expect to be able to offer service to Middle Street, and which at that time, we're going to, again, on a multimodal, have to operate a bus service from there. We'll probably be there for close to 5 years. Our expectation to get us to Civic Center is going to be coming down the Dillingham corridor through Chinatown, past Bishop Street or the downtown stop to Civic Center. We expect to be there in May of 2029. Right now, that's what the plans are. So you're going to have this interim stop, two places, one starting out at Aloha Stadium and then the second one in Middle Street, which will be, again, an interim stop. We're not stopping there. But for all those people who are advocating that, we'll get a chance to see and feel what that's like. But we're going to take it definitely down. Coming down the Dillingham corridor is really important when we talk about not only transit-oriented development and the potential of what the developers want to do in Kapalama, most notably Kamehameha Schools, but also to get people passed down to the work center of downtown and then into the right on the threshold of Kaka'ako. So, this is going to be exciting to watch. And I feel really good about the fact that we can now say it's 7 years away. We walked into office. The first thing we were hearing was a $3.6 billion cost overrun in 2033 completion date, and a lot of other numbers that didn't make a lot of sense that were really quite unsettling. That I think we're just adding to the frustration, if you will, in some cases anger about the project. I think this brings clarity, it brings direction, and we can afford to build this. And if we get the FTA to sign off on it, then we have to deliver on it. It's going to be a good thing.
I want to move on to COVID for a moment. We are about a week away from having all the mask mandates gone in the state. Do you think that the governor has let it go too long when it comes to the mask mandate? And also, how are you going to adapt just day to day in your own life? Will you require your staff to wear masks indoors? Are you going away from that? Sort of, how do you proceed out of COVID?
Well, I'm not going to mandate our staff wearing masks indoors. I mean, I think it's been interesting. There's a lot of talk about this mask mandate, whether it's been too long or whatever, but I'm still amazed at the amount of people. We haven't had an outdoor mask mandate in months, and yet everywhere I go and drive out in the street, I see probably more than 90% of the people walking around with masks on. And yet they don't have to. In fact, I had a very interesting experience. I got time for a quick anecdote. A few weeks ago, I was out walking my puppy on a Sunday morning, like at 8:15 in the morning, absolutely nobody around me. And up comes this older gentleman. He's walking up the sidewalk with his mask on. I'm holding my mask in my hand because I needed my mask to go through the condominium area that I live in. You have to ride down an elevator with it on. So I'm holding it. He walks up to me, puts his mask down and says, "Put your mask on, Mayor." And he kept walking. And I thought, I wanted so much to say to him, "Sir, I'm out here. There's nobody here. We're outdoors. We don't even have to do this." But I really do think that even though this is going to get lifted and other people will respond differently, I think we're going to see a lot of mask wearing for some time. What I'm hoping is it's not going to create unnecessary tensions between people when you go into gatherings and somebody who chooses to wear a mask, their option, versus having to wear a mask and people who are not wearing it, whether or not that, we're going to have to live through that. I'm hoping that that'll be an easy transition. But as far as I'm concerned, from the standpoint of what we do in our offices, I'm not going to make it anybody has to. But at the same time, if somebody has a mask on, I'm not going to tell them to take it off either. I would never think of doing that. I think we're going to ease into this. It's going to take a while.
How concerned are you about what's happening in Europe and through Asia? We're seeing another increase in these new Omicron, this variant of the Omicron. And then how do you feel we are going into this maybe another phase of another variant?
Well, look, full disclosure here. I mean, I don't want to surprise you, but I'm not an epidemiologist, okay? And this has been a fast year of doing a lot of discovery with all kinds of healthcare professionals over COVID. It's been really an amazing journey. But one of the things that we've been afforded, in addition to what I read and see coming out of a media background, I try to pay attention to what, the stories are. We had the benefit of talking to senior leading people at Harvard and Johns Hopkins University through this Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative I've been a part of. And at the same time, we're all wide in on what the CDC is saying. And I think the best I could offer you, because nobody really knows, is, the BA variant is what it is, but there could be an uptick, but nobody's calling it a surge. We'll have to take a look at it. We're in a different world place. I think one of the things that helps Hawaii is that we have, let's say, the people who are most vulnerable. When we first started out giving vaccinations, just a little bit longer than a year ago, 98% of our people 65 and over have been vaccinated twice. The boosters plateaued at about 544,000 statewide, but we have a pretty high percentage of people here in Hawaii vaccinated. And I do believe in the efficacy of the drug, and it's been proven over and over again, especially in the United States. The drugs that we were using between Moderna, Pfizer, and even the J&J. And so I don't know, I can't speak for this, but everybody I've talked to said that we're going to be hearing about variants, but they may not be anything like what we've just lived through with respect to the initial strains of COVID, then the deadly Delta, and then, of course, the highly infectious Omicron. I don't think we're anticipating another scenario like that, but nobody knows. There's still a lot of unknowns. I don't want to try to predict the future. I think the one thing that I can offer, we learned a lot through this experience. We know that our city can be nimble, and we will act accordingly should something present itself that none of us hope happens.
I want to ask you about the vaccine mandate for new employees. The governor is obviously getting rid of his emergency proclamation. However, he did say that he is keeping a vaccine mandate for new hires to the state. They're getting rid of the testing every week or being vaccinated for existing employees. But for new hires, they will have to be vaccinated. Is the city and county going to take a similar approach, or are you getting rid of that requirement?
Well, we haven't looked at that. That's a good question. We haven't even discussed it, to be honest with you. I think it's worth it. Next time I'm on, if you make it less than a few months from now, I'll give you the answer to that. Look, we took an aggressive approach. We were the only county, and even the state didn't do that when I said mandatory vaccines for our employees. And as it turned out, we ended up with about 93% of our employees were vaccinated. We gave out a bunch of religious exemptions. Most of them went to first responders. And when it all got said and done, out of the 8,600 employees we have currently working for the city, we lost about 25 people, either through retirement, resignations, or we had to say goodbye to them for not wanting to get vaccinated. That's a pretty small number, all things being equal. When I'm talking about the retirements, were tied to having to be vaccinated. So, I thought we came through it pretty well, and we wanted to provide a safe work environment for our employees. We wanted that peace of mind for them. As you know, it created a certain amount of tension. I was just talking about the face mask potentially creating tension. We had tensions going on in the workplace as well about who was in there, who wasn't vaccinated, especially when the disease was contagious. So, we did the best we could. I thought we got through it pretty well. We tested all those people who got the exemptions. We try to keep everybody healthy, and we got through it okay.
We're seeing some comments here by our viewers about crime in our communities and what we're seeing in an uptick in some of the areas of town. Of course, recently, over the weekend, a shooting in Waikiki as well. Your thoughts on where we're at with that? I know that you had mentioned in your city that one of your priorities is helping to restore some of these positions to the HPD and make sure that becomes a priority. Beyond that and just anything else, your thoughts on the crime rates and how we deal with that?
Yeah, well, the safety issue is a big issue, number one, but this is not necessarily about how many police officers we have. And we have considered to be in a lot of places very strict gun laws here, but yet you're seeing, more shootings now of late. And actually, quite honestly, we were seeing them during 2019 as well, prior to COVID. And I remember that when I was working at Hawaii News Now, and we were reporting on a rash of shootings then. And I think somewhat subsided to a point during the COVID thing. But I'm real concerned because of how people are coming into guns. People can buy these ghost guns online now and assemble them and buy different parts and different things like that. I've not been briefed by HPD yet over the events of the weekend. Clearly, police presence in some situations can deter violent crime, But oftentimes these things happen in moments when, even if we were at full complement of police officers, that wouldn't happen. So it's a real concern. And whether or not that ultimately evolves into even stricter gun laws, that remains to be seen. There's a big argument on both sides, but we already have strict gun laws here in Hawaii, make it very difficult, if not impossible, for somebody even under the age of 18. It's just that, in our society today, people are dealing with a lot of issues, and I see these things like the young man who shot a guy he knows right in the middle of Waikiki. I mean, that's hard to comprehend, that kind of violence under that circumstance. And I don't even know the mitigating factors, but just to do that, I mean, how do you prevent something like that? You can apprehend somebody, but how do you even prevent something like that?
Right. I mean, to your point, having an additional officer in that moment may not have made a difference, but sort of larger scale, SHOPO has levied complaints on this program and also through press conferences and other, media outlets that they don't think that there are enough beat officers. They cited some areas having 58% of what they should have. Do you think there are enough cops on the street right now? And
no,
if not,
I don't.
okay.
No, we've said this all along. We came into office. I had the SHOPO endorsement. I had very candid conversations with them. And at that time, when I came in, there was and through the campaign and then getting elected last year, we had north of 300 openings. But, there's a certain amount of people that have retired and we've hired or whatever. And then we had a graduating class. The last one, maybe there's been one since, I had 19 graduate out of a class initially of 48. We have to be recruiting. I believe we have 322 openings. I'm very much in agreement with SHOPO on this. But very much in agreement. Chief Vanek and I, Interim Chief Vanek, have had long discussions about recruiting and what can we possibly do. We're looking at everything we can with respect to, whether we're recruiting outside of Hawaii, whether we're talking about changing work shifts to different hours to make it even more attractive, and anything and everything. But we need more police presence. I don't think we'll fill the 322 positions. I don't think it's ever been filled. But I think I'd like to get about 200 police officers. And what I've asked, more than what we have, and when I've asked, and by the way, SHOPO would tell you that we could actually cover all the beats right now if we were willing to be flexible in some of the other things that have to happen. But that's even then putting a strain on overtime and on the wear and tear on individuals. So I think we do need physically more police officers. And so to that point, I asked, how long would it take for us? Let's just say as an ideal goal to hire 200 police officers, 2/3 of that, to add to our existing staff. And at the same time, offset the number of people that will retire between now and then. And they said it's about 30 months. If you look at the size of the classes that they can train, the frequency of those classes. So it's a 2.5-year plan. So now that Chief Vanek has withdrawn his name, I think this has to be a discussion with the incoming chief of police, whomever the candidate may be, on a lot of levels, but one has to be recruiting. I think the police department has to be much more aggressive in recruiting, as I do the city in general. We have 11,600 positions in the city. We have 8,600 filled. That's the 3,000 openings I mentioned earlier. Part of that is 300 plus police officers. And I really think that first and foremost, knowing full well what I think I know about the psychology of a community, feeling safe is of absolute paramount importance. And police officers and their presence help make people feel safe. And they are the ones, if something does happen, who you do call, and they are the ones, through their bravery, put their lives on the line every day. We need more of that to complement how we live here every day. I'm a big supporter of helping with that.
Well, speaking of HPD, a question coming in here from Ann asking, when will we get a permanent chief? We know that this has been a process that has taken some time. We talked to members of the police commission who said it could take another 6 months.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that, Ryan. I don't want to hear that. I don't know who your sources are. Let me tell you, I purposely put that in my State of the Union last week to say it's a personal point of contention for me, because I've had to deal with Chief Vanek on an interim basis and understand on some levels how that can be compromising from a leadership standpoint. I'm hoping no later than June, and that's something I was hanging on from some time ago when they told me. And when they told me that June, I had an even stronger reaction than you just got from me about 6 months, but I'm not going to do that right here, right now. I mean, I don't understand why it has to take that long. We were able to effectively do a transition with the fire department. Again, brave men and women. And Kalani Howe is now the new chief, and Jason Kalama Salama is our assistant deputy chief. And we were able to get through that, even with the unions and everything. We did that transition very smoothly when Chief Nevers retired. We went through the ample screening process. We should have filled this chief of police position much sooner.
One of the methods or one of the strategies to sort of take some burden off the officers is the CORE program, which is to help people who are homeless and may have mental health issues and have other issues that police often get called to, but maybe aren't the best to respond to. How do you think the CORE program is going? And, once those folks get picked up, are there enough facilities for them to go to so that the cycle can be broken?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you raised the CORE program, because that's one of the things that I did emphasize with respect to the CORE program. I'll come back to it. Is we need more facilities where we can treat for people's medical conditions, their mental health, their substance problems. We know that that's very prevalent. And that's what CORE does address. It addresses people one by one on the street. We're not using the police as a tip of the spear. We've said repeatedly prior to even office that compassionate disruption did not work. It didn't address the systemic problems of what we wanted to deal with. And so, we have right now, as we said, we got a cadre of 4 ambulances that we converted in 3 SUVs. We'll probably have more vehicles going forward. We have 17 healthcare workers, and we expect to have, well before the end of the year, at the places we've got put other things we're working on, looking at some major facility in Connie Mitchell, the work that they do at IHS as well. So the idea here is to address people with the actual and give them the services and help that they really need. And we're just beginning that. We're very excited about it. I'm really grateful to Jim Ireland, Dr. Jim Ireland, for taking it on as part of EMS. But again, it's hopefully in some ways alleviates the situation for the police, because quite honestly, they're not trained for some of that stuff that you encounter when you go to help a homeless person on the street, especially one that is how we deal with that. And we think we want to deal with it in a humane way, a situation that we know works. And we're very excited and encouraged by that. And the other part of that, as I talked about last week, is our Hawaii Housing Now program, in which this past year we housed 300 families, 300 households, 787 people, mostly from Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. These were the people who were really impacted adversely from COVID. These are the kind of efforts we're making, and we'll make a lot more, because quite honestly, we didn't have the facilities, and we're trying to gear up as fast as we can. And I'm not making any excuses, but we stepped into office in the middle of this pandemic. We didn't even have vaccines available to us till the latter part of January. And a lot of people have overlooked all the obstacles we had to overcome, not the least of which was a lack of resources to actually treat this the way we wanted to. And once we developed our strategy, the time and money that it would take to allocate to that, it's all a work in progress. But I think we're off to a great start. We're really beginning to have an impact. I think it's a scalable problem. We'll see what the point in time count is, but I've never really believed that. I think it's a multiple of that number. But even if it's a multiple of, let's say, a 5,000, let's say it's 10,000, there's something we can do with that. We can take a very big bite out of our homeless population, and we will.
Well, unfortunately, our time is up. But before we go, we just wanted to allow you one final thought. I
want to know why this is. I want to know why this isn't 2 hours long. You guys, 30 minutes.
We're happy to talk to
you. It goes by.
It does. There's so many issues. But before we let you go, you've been on the job now for a little over a year. What do you say? What are you most proud of? What you folks have been able to accomplish in this first year, and what are you looking forward to the most moving forward?
Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you asking me that. I'm first and foremost proud of the team of men and women we brought in here, because everybody signed up understanding what the circumstances were, and everybody understood the expectation was for us to drive execution, make things happen, build back trust, provide leadership, and it's a real challenge because the city is a very dynamic and very complex place. But, we don't get the time to talk about all of that. But I see and we understand the plans in motion. I think our budget this year is reflective of that. I'm really excited about that, where our priorities are. We talked about that specifically during last week's State of City. So I think I'm most proud of the fact that we've done a really good job in our first year. But I think the potential of what we can get done as we move forward now, coming not only out of COVID, but getting our own sea legs, having our own budget to work with, understanding the commitment these men and women have to the various areas that we have to focus on to make life better here, I'm excited about that. And we're going to deliver on that.
Always great to talk to you, Mayor Rick Blangiardi. We won't let it go months next time. We'll have you on much sooner than that if you'll have us.
I feel like one of those canceled syndication shows. Oh, yeah, okay. We'll bring back Blangiardi, I guess. We'll put him on a rerun. Anyway, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you
We love
so much,
having
Mayor.
you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor. Well, we spent a good deal of time, Ryan, right at the top, talking about his announcement regarding rail and the adaptation that he is proposing to end the rail, for now at least, in Kaka'ako at South Street, and what they're calling Civic Center, and not go all the way to Ala Moana. He's saying that, he said throughout that if it doesn't pencil, it won't happen. And right now, that's as far as they think that they can get it. Of course, that's all contingent on the FTA approving that change to the plan. We have been told for years now that it's 20 miles and no ifs, ands, or buts, but it does seem like the mayor feels very confident that he had a good meeting in Washington and that there could be some room for change when it comes to the rail route.
Yeah, and making it very clear that that is sort of a plan for now. He also reiterated the fact that there will continue to be talks and plans to try to get the rail eventually to Ala Moana. And he also mentioned maybe adding more on the front end in Kapolei, as adding another stop that way, maybe going towards Kamakana-Ali'i, but saying that for now, in where they are at, this is sort of what they are looking at now to kind of help based on everything that they have going on with the city, of course, with the budget, as well as the understanding the financing of this project as a whole. We also heard from him about the intermediate plans to begin the rail line that could run to Aloha Stadium. Could also, he mentioned, by later this year, we could see that rail line running from Kapolei to Aloha Stadium, and then eventually making its way to Middle Street once that is completed as well.
Right. And then we also talked about COVID. He did say that he won't be requiring his staff and others to wear masks indoors when the mask mandate is lifted, but he is sympathetic to people who want to continue to mask and says that there will be this adjustment period, and he hopes that it is not contentious. The city has not made a decision as to whether to require new hires to continue to be vaccinated or whether he will lift that. The governor on this program had said that they're going to keep that requirement for state employees. We'll wait to see what the city and county decides on that. Also talked about law enforcement and the need for active recruiting, and his expectation that we will have a new chief by this summer.
Yeah, you heard his strong stance on when he wants that chief in place, saying that this process has taken way too long, and he's looking forward to welcoming in a permanent chief into that position sometime soon. Of course, this is somewhat different from what we heard from the police commission when we talked to them on this program, saying that they are going through this process of trying to find the right person and conducting various surveys and things that they have done already thus far to get them to this point. So we'll see what happens and continue to keep you posted as the search for the next police chief of HPD continues.
Yeah, always great to hear from the mayor. You hear a lot of passion in what he's presenting, and on every topic he really did have an answer. So always great to hear from him. Also about the CORE program and the efforts to eradicate homelessness in our community. On Wednesday, we'll be talking to Congressman Ed Case. Our focus is going to be on Red Hill, talking about whether the Navy is meeting what they have set out and what kind of sort of timeline we're looking at, what decommissioning that facility really looks like, and how he's feeling about how all of that is going right now. So we look forward to talking to Congressman Ed Case right here on Wednesday. Until then, have a great week, and we'll see you then.
Aloha. We'll see you then.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.